Good morning. Welcome to the Monday, March 16th Village Board special meeting. We'll begin with the pledge. This meeting is called to order.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will take the roll. Trustee Lopez.
Present.
Trustee Levin.
Present.
Trustee Fritchie. Mayor Garrity.
Present.
Trustee Quezada.
Present.
Trustee Quezada is appearing telephonically, which is in accord with Executive Order 202.1 dated March 13th, 2020.
Thank you for that.
Are there any announcements?
I would like to make an announcement to the public as we open our meeting. What we are experiencing now is unprecedented in our lifetimes, and facing so many unknowns can be frightening. The burdens of life do not fall equally on the shoulders of all people, and these extreme circumstances only exacerbate that disparity. People who are able to work remotely are also more likely to have health care benefits, financial savings, and comfortable living space. For thousands of families in Ossining, that is not the case. Fortunately, there are actions being taken by village government and the school district to ensure that no Ossining family will go hungry. We are also considering how we can support our local businesses in securing financial relief so that they can survive the current economic hardships and keep some level of employment for their staff. The restrictions being put in place are not done lightly, and they are not done with the intention to protect the health of any particular individual. Social distancing is the means by which we will slow the spread of the virus, and these measures will be in place for weeks, not days. I wish I could answer the question of how long. I can only say the sooner we collectively adopt social distancing practices, the sooner we will be past the most aggressive interventions. In some regards, we have learned from the experiences in China, South Korea, and Italy, at least on a state and local level. For many of our neighbors, the economic devastation poses a greater immediate threat than the health care risks. In a community where so many lives are at the financial margins, lost wages are not an abstract consideration. Families are figuring out if they can work remotely or where their children can be safely cared for in the event that schools will remain closed for weeks. Retail businesses are deciding how much to reduce their staff. Local government offices are changing their focus, working remotely, or implementing procedures to limit interactions with the public. Schools, local governments, and social service agencies are mobilizing to provide grab-and-go meals and groceries to keep people fed. And tenants who will lose wages can have some peace of mind knowing that eviction proceedings and pending eviction notices are suspended until further notice. On a parallel path to the immediate actions being implemented to slow the spread, we must proactively stabilize our small business community. Ossining's local economic prosperity is built on a foundation of small businesses that employ local residents and depend on foot traffic. I'm calling on Governor Cuomo to provide financial relief to small businesses by waiving the quarterly sales tax payments due later this week and to forgive all payroll taxes until the state of emergency is lifted. I'll be reaching out to Congresswoman Lowy and our senators and president to consider implementing a small portion of the proposed payroll tax relief directed at small businesses in areas during the time they are experiencing a state of emergency. I am optimistic that our state and federal government will take immediate action to alleviate financial pressure so that more of these businesses will survive this time of extreme measures. If, like me, you have spent recent days reading and listening to scientific reports and coming to understand how restrictions now underway will form a picture of what to expect. A picture of what our lives will look like for the coming weeks. and what social distancing means for each of us. As we all strive to make well-informed decisions, I encourage you to practice compassion for your neighbors, your family members, and yourselves. This weekend, my sons and I wrote a list of activities we'll accomplish each day. Included on that list will be a phone call and a card to someone we love, someone who might feel lonely. It also includes finding a responsible way to support one of our small businesses that remains open. They are hoping that means we will regularly be enjoying donuts from Ossining Bakery. We'll see. It could also mean buying gift cards for future use or to donate to a family in need or takeout. We are a generous and kind community. These weeks will challenge us to draw on those reserves. The way we will get through this is by supporting each other, and we must find a way to transcend and yet continue to practice social distancing. And with that, we have some very serious and thoughtful discussions to have about personnel. Madam Manager.
Yes, I'd like to, if we have no more announcements, I'd like to introduce Steve Sage, our Director of Personnel, to discuss some adoptions we have to our sick time and paid time off policy during this time.
Good morning, all. As I had mentioned in our meeting the other day, we are working on a sick policy that will help to or hope to curtail some of the issues that are involved with the COVID-19. Many of them are based in social distancing. We are taking a proactive approach to making sure that many of our employees who have the ability to work from home can and will work from home. And we are writing provisions for anybody who does not have the ability to work from home to be able to utilize their sick time without any kind of penalty, and that for anybody who's under a mandatory quarantine or potentially comes down with the virus will be, in essence, mimicking the state and the benefit that they're providing to their employees. Are there any specific questions? Do you want to talk about it at all? Everybody got a copy over the weekend?
You mentioned there was a slight change from what was sent around.
Correct. Yes, sir.
I'll let them know what that is.
Thank you. We wrote a provision for seasonal employees. Seasonal employees usually work a duration of a couple of months, knowing that we may potentially be shutting down certain programs, closing certain buildings to the public. We won't really necessarily have work for those employees to do. So we wrote a provision for them, but then over the weekend, realizing that hourly employees may be in the same boat. Even though their duration won't end in a month or 2 months, they may be based on a schedule that is derived by public interaction and the things that certain of our buildings, most notably the community center, operate. So we just wrote a provision in there that says that they may have hours curtailed, but we'll try to work best to their schedule.
So perhaps you can just, are you going to get into any of the details of how village government will continue to operate and will change the way that it operates?
So village government is set to continue to operate. All managers have the ability to work remotely, and we're talking to each department today, finding out which staff have that ability. Most of this we've done already, but we're sort of establishing a protocol. We would like to make sure that anybody who is susceptible in a high-risk category has the opportunity to work from home at this point. We had talked about, we also want to talk about limiting public access to the fullest extent possible to all our buildings. So I'll be meeting with the Ops Center after this meeting to talk about what is absolutely necessary. Right now, most of the things that we do, that people come in, can be put on hold, done by mail, or done by online. There may be some exceptions, but we're trying to minimize that with different ways we can just suspend the need for people to come in the building at this time, or any of the buildings. The rec center is closed today, and we had always intended to mirror the school district with the rec center. Right now, we are recommending that we close the rec center in conjunction with the school district. We do have the ability to use the rec center and have staff work at the rec center while it's not in operation, because we have worked out a plan with Feeding Westchester to create a food distribution hub there, which would be a drive-in hub. We can store pallets of food there, and we can have staff working on distributing food. So we're looking at rolling that out today. The times, we would start doing food distribution on Tuesdays and Fridays rather, and food distribution will start in the morning at the rec center. We will then have staggered hours to Market Square, and then in the afternoon, evening, food distribution will take place at Star of Bethlehem. And we're coordinating all that now. The school district is also working with Feeding Westchester directly, and they will have, I believe they will be announcing their food schedule as well. So the good news is we have a lot of opportunities for families who are feeling hard hit by the immediate loss of income they may be suffering, that we will have ample food supply for those people. And St. Anne's, Star of Bethlehem, and the Ossining Food Pantry will also be distributing food in different ways. So in that regard, we want to reassure people that they will have access to food. Other safety net agencies in Ossining are mobilizing right now to provide, to help people meet other needs, including the Ossining Microfund, which will be able to provide loans of up to $2,000 to people in need. Those are free, no interest loans for people who are suffering a hardship due to loss of income at this time. We are also working on, with different organization, CAP, St. Vincent de Paul, and others to help distribute gift certificates and things for other items, non-food items. So we are doing everything we can to make sure that our community has what they need during this time, and that we will be able to support them as we get through this and after this finally passes. With regard to staff, as I said, we are looking right now to limit access and essentially close our buildings to the public, but we will still continue to provide services, and the sick policy that Steve has been working on will make sure that we are able to do that effectively. Craig Cooper's been working on the technology we need to do that. So we are in good shape to keep day-to-day operations going. One of our agenda items, too, that is not on the agenda, but we will add today is we would like a resolution authorizing me to sign a contract with Suburban Carting in the event that we are not, for any reason, hopefully worst case scenario, that our sanitation department is not able to function fully. So again, we're thinking of every possible thing that we need to be doing, and we will keep doing it.
One of the ways that we can help people be able to continue paying their bills as needed without coming in person to do it is to encourage online payments. There is obviously a fee associated with that typically. I see that the city of Yonkers has said that they will reimburse all online fees. Do we have the ability to do that? Yonkers is one of the big 5 cities. They have more powers than we do. But is there some way that we can do that in village government?
We can look into that. I can't say that we have that capability right now, and unfortunately, we have certain bills that we're not quite online yet. So we will do our best to address that.
Okay.
I have a question, Steve.
Yes, sir.
Is there a point where this special sick leave sunsets?
Yeah, we did write into the opening paragraph that these are temporary. I think that would be a conversation just like this about when our state, our country has moved past it, and then we can lift those provisions. I would assume we'd also take into account anybody who potentially may be under one of these one of these categories, somebody who's under a mandatory quarantine, or somebody who's currently healing from the virus if they had contracted it.
Got
But
it.
yeah,
Because my sense is that there isn't a date that, okay, now we're done, and after this there's no more virus. It kind of will peter off, and so what your sense of is what would trigger us, and what the mechanism would be, whether we would do this again. What would be the mechanism to reverse this, essentially?
Gotcha. I think that we would take our cues from the state and federal government about when they decide when people can start to return to school, for example, when we start, I mean, it's been very public about they want to make the mountain into a hill and flatten that curve. Once we feel that we've done that successfully as a society, we can review whether we need to lift it up. And like I said, it would really depend on how our workforce is utilizing it at that point. We're obviously not going to lift it if somebody's currently, at the tail end of their quarantine. But if we know.
Yeah.
Other questions, Bob and Rika?
Yeah. Whoops. Let me have your mic. I think you can hear without the mic.
You can hear without the mic. That just amplifies it.
I know, but, all right. So just a couple of questions. Thank you for doing this, because this is really complicated. I haven't been sleeping well myself looking at all this stuff. So I do suggest that there needs to be, not for us to vote on anything or to approve, but the idea of quarantine is a very loose concept. So the way it works right now, and I think it's crazy, but I don't make up the rules. So, you could have a spouse coming home and being told to be quarantined, but the rest of the family actually isn't. And there's all these degrees of separation. So who do people call? Are you like the contact person, or like how is this working when people have questions? Like if I get a question from someone about this, who am I calling?
I have been the point of contact for several of our employees who are in this situation. To be quite frank, I think that the response that some of our workforce have gotten from their medical providers has been shocking to me, and I've been working with those employees to make sure that they are pressing their healthcare providers for the appropriate documentation, asking them for proper advice on whether they should be quarantined. We have, the CDC at one point had issued people who are mandatory testing, mandatory quarantine, people who they were suggesting testing for. So I've been using that in order to make sure that our employees have been interacting with their doctors on those guidelines. And to be quite honest, when we've pushed back on our employees and those employees that push back on their doctors, they've gotten exactly what we've asked for. Because we're not asking for anything that the CDC has not issued as the
Right.
guideline. So I would think that in that situation where a family member is under a directed quarantine, that they would also be quarantining the family.
Yeah, you would think, but that's actually not how and it's not working in New Rochelle at all that way.
I would imagine.
Because the streets are full with kids and the parents are being quarantined. And then the kids go back. And it's a little scary, actually.
Correct.
So you're the contact person and what you're saying is what a lot of people in your position are actually saying. That's why I'm concerned. So people need to know a contact person, not only your employees, but families of employees, especially caretakers. So you're the person.
I would hope that
Okay.
once we formally roll out this process or this policy and the managers know the policy, that they can instruct their employees on how to move forward and what documentation they would need and what kind of categories they would fall under. But if a manager ever needed help or if there was a unique situation that we're just not capturing here, I have been and I will continue to be.
So I would just ask that every conversation managers and department heads are having be in an email and copy to someone else.
Okay?
So, because my expectation is that there will be mixed messages within 24 hours.
Okay.
That's just human nature. It's not a statement about any one individual. I think at the end of all this, there's going to have to be a super fund the way there was after 9/11. And for those that did not document, and for those that start having fights when it's all over, I believe the 9/11 case was just settled last year. That's how long it took to settle all the disputes about what people were told. And I think the municipalities will be going through this as well. So let's prevent. I mean, that's
Yes, no, we've
the
been.
learning, right? And it's also for the fiduciary responsibility of money. We don't want to find ourselves not having crossed the T's and dotted the I's. And I'm fully aware that you're on top of it. Because to write this thing up, has probably taken many, many hours.
Yes, it's also a group effort, lots of back and forth
I'm
with the
sure, and-
management staff, and yeah.
It's commendable because I've been working and we're not this far along and I don't have as many people to talk to as you do. So it's really, it's terrific. I would just say, without a doctor's note, nothing's acceptable, unfortunately, because,
Yeah, and I mean,
Okay.
the reality situation is, if you're in a position that you've had direct close contact with somebody that is been quarantined or that they believe to have the virus, then your doctor should be directing you in the same manner.
okay.
And just to what you're saying about, we've been very proactive in making sure that all of the costs that may be at one point reimbursed, refunded, however that works, we've been taking notes on everything that we need to make sure that we're accounting for.
Okay, and overtime, there was, I didn't see it this time, I thought I'd seen something.
There are two notes in here about
Okay.
overtime.
I couldn't find it when I just looked for it, so,
Yeah, if you have an underlying condition and you want to take time off of work in
Oh,
order to
great.
protect yourself, or if you're under a precautionary quarantine by your doctor, again, we'll allow you to use sick time, but you wouldn't be available for call-in or overtime.
okay. And is there any opportunity for people, not everybody can, as the mayor said, some jobs are just brick and mortar. There's really nothing you can do about that. Are there opportunities, and are you guys, I'm not looking at the policy at this point, are you looking at cross-pollination of people? In other words, I normally do X, X can't be done, it's a brick and mortar job. Are you looking to maybe have that person do something else and help with something else? Or is that like not within a policy of the way municipalities work?
We have had preliminary conversations about that. One of the things that we've spoken about and what Karen is working on is our community center staff. If we're going to start to be preparing meals for our community and our community center is shuttered, then maybe we can put the workers in our community center towards distributing, building meals, stuff like that.
We'll have a separate conversation about delivering meals when
Well, I
we're
just
done.
want to, are we talking about meals or
No,
grabbing the
So at
groceries?
the community center,
That's-
let's be very clear.
Yeah.
This is Feeding Westchester. So the senior nutrition program that is run out of the town, they are still going to continue their feeding program, which they do all the time, their home meal delivery. There is no more, the senior program, the congregant meal ended last week. When we, right now, when we announced today that we will be closing the community center, and again, we'll follow similar messaging. I actually do want to talk about this. The community center offers a resource too that could potentially be used for extra beds in a worst case scenario. My sense is that we maybe issue a memo that we're closed until further notice, because there could be other uses for that facility. Regardless of whether school opens or closes, opens again. Right now, the staff will be, Feeding Westchester relies on volunteers. They need 10 to 15 volunteers to do food distribution. They will be acting as those volunteers under Feeding Westchester rather. And then we will also, Feeding Westchester said since they want to be here for extended amount of time and multiple days, could they use the site to store food, which seems appropriate as well. So that's the capacity we would be using the staff. The staff would be provided, there would be safety guidelines, distancing, gloves, things of that nature. But right now we have no plans to have the staff, other than the senior nutrition staff, be delivering meals or even preparing meals. This is all prepackaged produce, dry goods, things like that.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Steve, I'm so grateful that you are part of our staff. You came on at a perfect time for us, and we are very fortunate to have you in this position. Thank you so much. I know that you've been a huge value to Karen and to the management staff and to all of the folks in village government.
Thank you for the kind words. Thank you.
Okay, we have a couple of things we want to talk about. Yes. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. Thank you, Clerk Counsel.
Adoption of special sick leave provisions concerning COVID-19. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining adopts the special sick leave provisions concerning COVID-19 reprinted below effective immediately, and is further resolved that the adopted policy shall be provided to all affected village employees and shall be prominently posted at the municipal building, John Paul Rodriguez Ossining Operations Center, Joseph G. Caputo Community Center, and the Indian Brook Water Treatment Facility. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Comments on the board? Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Next, folks, is it would be new business, and that is the authorization for the village manager to enter into an agreement with Suburban Carting. Karen, if you want to.
A few weeks ago, our village engineer and I discussed having backup plans for all essential services. Obviously, sanitation is an essential service. And our village engineer, Paul Fraioli, entered a discussion with Suburban Carting, who currently does sanitation for the town of Ossining, and was able to negotiate a contract in the event that we are unable to provide that service for any reason during this time. We can contract with Suburban Carting. I believe you all got a copy of the contract, and we have all here if you have any questions. But we would like to enter this contract so we are prepared, if need be, to continue to provide essential sanitation services.
So I'm sorry, who were you going to ask? So the only question is, what would those conditions be that you would need to have? What would you perceive to be?
Staff quarantined, not enough staff to fulfill the position. I mean, that's, I think, the main one.
That's the main reason?
That would be the main reason.
Well, I just have I'm fine with that. I just have a question. So half your staff is quarantined. Yeah, I think, Paul, I'd just like to ask you real quick. I know there's been times where you've had to double up on routes and stuff, so I'm presuming that would be the last case scenario, that you would be doubling up with the guys or doubling up their pickups and, whatever's related to that, until we got to a point where we feel we need this.
That's correct. This is really to build on what Trustee Levin said earlier with cross-training. Everyone in Public Works now that's in the Highway or Sanitation Department have one time or another worked on the sanitation routes, and every CDL driver that we have has driven a garbage truck at one time or another in their career. So yeah, it would take a full complement of 12 people to be out. I'm sorry, it would take the full complement of the 9 people and the foreman to be out and not be able to be backfilled. So it's really it is a little bit of a belts and suspenders. It's more in the case of if I was really the only one that could come in to Public Works and kind of coordinate, whether virtually or present, if the entire Public Works team was quarantined.
All right, so belts and suspenders is a good way of describing it, and thank you for having such forethought, and we're not anticipating that this is likely to come into play, but we're taking every measure
Prepare for the
possible.
worst, hope for the best.
I have a question about this. This assumes that this is an extreme situation for us, but that they would be healthy. Is there a situation where they would also be facing quarantine and is this turtles all the way down? Is there?
I guess that's when what I'm hearing you say is something where belts and suspenders doesn't matter, and we would probably be asking people to keep their household waste and their recyclables inside the house, away from the public nuisance of leaving it on the curb and creating the health hazard that causes, if we really got to that.
So I think we've all spent a fair amount of time trying to understand the experience in China and Italy and South Korea. I probably am not looking at it through a Public Works lens. Have you heard any stories of that being any of the concerns?
I haven't. I guess I'm looking forward to what's going to happen in New York City, because that garbage builds up fast. You could see, it wasn't that long ago when they had the garbage strike down there. You could see what the streets look like. So we obviously don't want to have that around here.
the things that we're working on, because we don't have answers necessarily, if we go all the way down the line of what could possibly be worst case scenario, is that every day news is changing. We are trying very hard to make sure that we are reaching out to nonprofit services, other services to bolster where we can, but also at a certain point, we would likely be relying on state, National Guard, and a whole host of necessity is the mother of invention solutions. Again, our goal is, to the degree that we can humanly possible anticipate need, is to have that in place, so we're not in a position where we're like, oh, we need somebody to help and suburban carding's booked full.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul.
So is there a resolution for this?
There is authorization for the village manager to enter into an agreement with Suburban Carding. Resolved that the village manager is authorized to enter into an agreement with Suburban Carding, 566 North State Road, Briarcliff Manor, New York, 10510, for Suburban Carding to provide labor and equipment for the daily collection of village waste and subsequent transport to Charles Point and Northern Tier Recycling Station in the event that the village is unable to provide the carting and transport services. And be it further resolved that the terms of the agreement are consistent with the terms set out in the March 11, 2020 proposal from Suburban Carding Company. Do I have a motion?
Can I, I'm sorry, I need to,
Just so moved, and then we can
so
comment.
moved, I have,
Second.
I would like things, sorry, I would like things related to the coronavirus to be listed as related to the coronavirus, even policies. So there's a clear public record that this was taken as part of a contingency plan or whatever plan related specific, and everything, any policy and any purchase and anything else. That would be helpful for future record keeping, for current record keeping for future knowledge, excuse me.
We are tracking these as initiatives and costs associated to
But I'd like
specifically,
this,
yes.
the wording in here to be
In
as
the,
related.
Resolution to
I
explicitly
want,
say that?
I want things, yes, because this is what goes into the public record.
Trustee Levin, I have no issue. I just want to make sure that's
Yes,
what you're
that
asking.
is correct.
All right,
Okay.
so
No, I
need-
wasn't thinking you had an issue, I'm
no,
just
I
explaining
need to
myself.
be able to revise the resolution while you're here now, because you
Excellent,
seconded.
that's my point.
So then let me withdraw, because you've already moved and seconded.
Yes, I apologize
So
for
we
that.
can move it as amended, as you correct.
Yeah.
Let us know what you'd like it to say.
Doing it on the fly.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
we'll just
You're good at
wait.
that.
Yes, that's why I started to apologize 2 minutes before we did that.
Okay, folks. Okay, we'll add an extra resolved paragraph. And be it further resolved that these actions are being taken in light of the current COVID-19, COVID-19, words are just escaping me right now.
You say concerning COVID-19, that's consistent with
With
the sick leave policy.
No, I don't want to do that.
No, he doesn't want
No, I'm not tying one resolution to another resolution.
contingency
No, I'm just saying
plan
the
or?
I'm just saying the language.
You know what, fine.
We can
Be it
put- we
further
can
resolved
leave
that this is pursuant to the potential COVID-19 considerations, and we'll just leave it like that.
That's fine.
So moved as amended.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
so, there have been a few other things specific to COVID-19 that we've been talking about. So one is the closing of the rec center until further notice. And do we need to have a resolution?
No, but I do have one with regard to the two public hearings that are scheduled for Wednesday.
Okay.
I would like, folks, as you know, we have two public hearings scheduled for Wednesday. And just so the board is aware, the governor's executive order on Friday, I believe it was Friday, March 13th, yes, did provide a suspension to Public Officers Law 7, which deals with public hearings and public meetings. And in view of the fact it's a public hearing, what I've requested, and I have a resolution here, that would adjourn the public hearings from March 18th until May the 6th of 2020, always subject to review by this board. If the board wants to put in a different date, they are welcome to do that. It would have to be renoticed, obviously, and republished in the Gazette. But that at least puts it off so that the public is not coming here, and it can be so noted on the website that the public hearing has been adjourned.
Thank you for that. Do you want to read a resolution to that? Do people want to discuss it?
Well, I just, I've been reading so much, so it's probably just me. Is May 6th, why May 6th again? Because there have also been dates related to, maybe that was from the county, related to end of April and April 20th, and so there are a lot of dates flying around. Is this exactly what the date was? Oh,
So
okay.
April is one of those 5 Wednesday months. So if we did our fourth Wednesday, it would actually be the 22nd. So that is, just outside the 4-week guidelines of what a lot of people have been using. So the May 6th would be the one after that. Is there,
Oh, I see.
Is there a
So-
time sensitivity to any of these that would make us want to make it as soon as possible, or does it just make sense to wait until early May?
Local Law 1 deals with the municipal parking, Local Law 2 deals with the dog licensing.
Right.
Okay,
And we've been
so
discussing
that's
those since
fine.
last year.
Yeah,
so.
that's fine. No, I appreciate, Stuart, you mentioning the date. I'm sort of trying to figure out exactly all these executive order. There's so many different dates involved.
We had also discussed that all land use board meetings and boards and commission meetings would be put off 30 days.
That's the one I want to get to,
If
yeah.
we're going to do that, then this essentially would go past that.
Okay. I see.
Adjournment of public hearings on proposed local laws 1-2020 and 2-2020. Resolved, and I'm going to just sort of
On the fly?
riff here for a second.
Okay.
Resolved that in light of the recent executive orders issued by the governor on March 7, March 13, and March 14 with regard to the COVID-19 outbreak, that the March 18, 2020 public hearings for proposed local laws 1-2020 and 2-2020 are adjourned by the Board of Trustees until May 6, 2020, and it is further resolved that notice of the rescheduled date for the public hearing shall be published in the village's official newspaper in compliance with the Village Code, Section 28-1. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Stuart, I did just want to, as we are talking about meetings and the changes to the open meetings law, that was like everything else, evolving over the course of the week, and our understanding of it was evolving over the course of the week. We are mostly present here right now. Manny is by telephone, but not by video conference. Can you just clarify for us while we're all here, and we can make sure we really understand? For example, on Wednesday, we have another meeting scheduled. I don't know if we've decided if we're meeting on Wednesday or not definitively. It seems like if we're covering most of it today, maybe not, but we have other Wednesdays coming up, and if we want to continue moving the business forward, we may still meet. So tell us, what does that look like, particularly if there are instances where we would be potentially voting on things and need to have a quorum present or in some fashion?
And I'm going to thank my friends at the firm of Keenan Bean for putting it into bullet points. The governor's order allows a board to meet in the following manners, as it is right now, in person at a public location as it regularly does under the open meetings law. Second, in person at public locations with some or all of the members attending via video conference, and in-person attendance allowed at all locations where video conferencing is occurring, as well as the public location is permitted under the open meetings law. Another way that it can now be done under the executive order is by conference call with no in-person location. But the public must be able to listen into the conference call, which must be recorded and a transcript provided at a later date. Or finally, by video conferencing with no in-person location, but the public must be able to view the video conference online, which must be recorded and a transcript provided at a later meeting date. If you decide to go either by conference call with no in-person location or video conferencing with no in-person location, then the notice of meeting should indicate that in-person attendance will not be allowed at those meetings. A conference call or video link number should be provided in the notice of meeting, and that the meeting will be recorded and a transcript provided at a later date. It is recommended that if you're going to take, let's call it a significant action, and you can defer it, it would probably be best to defer it to a public meeting if you can. But if not, you do not have to. A quorum can be achieved when board members attend the meeting by conference call, video conferencing, or combination thereof. It is prudent, as we did tonight, at the beginning of the meeting, that the member who's attending by conference or video identify where they are and identify if anyone else is present in the room. If an in-person meeting is not provided, the board must provide a transcript. That's something that is not currently required by law because this is part of an executive order. What we would probably have to do is provide a summary initially, but we need to maintain the recording so that a full transcript is provided to the public and is made available and would be posted on the website.
Is the recording is the transcript?
No. The recording is not the transcript. The recording is a recording. A transcript is a physical document that has what people say. That is a transcript.
Is that in the executive order, or
Yes.
is that a?
Yes, it says transcript. Transcript is not a recording. You transcribe a recording. The transcription itself is different than the recording.
Right, so what I heard was, so for example, we have Trustee Quesada calling in. It said if it is a conference call, there is a transcript required, or a video conference can be provided with access to the video conference.
However, the current law does allow for a member to appear by video conference, but that's only one member. If you are going to go with no in-person and you're going to do it as a video link, you need to provide the public with the video
Okay.
link and a transcript.
Okay, so I guess I just want to understand. So we don't have easy capability, but we could certainly figure it out, of video conferencing if one or two members is not able to be present. That means A, they can still vote, right?
They can, but.
But so Manny's votes still count, right? We still have 5 voting members tonight, this
Right,
morning?
but what you require in that circumstance is the notice then must provide where that other person is doing their video conference, because the public is technically invited to go to that location to conduct the video conference, which means if Trustee Quezada was doing it from his home or Trustee Levin was doing it from her home, theoretically, someone from the public could come to that location. If you're doing with no in-person, then you basically have indicated no one comes to the meeting at all, and everyone either links by phone or by video conference.
And then we don't have to invite people into our living rooms, but we do have to provide a transcript.
You must provide a transcript.
If it's video conferencing and nobody's in the room, but it's a video conference among the 5 of us and whatever other people, it didn't sound like a transcript was required for that, but the full video conference was
No,
required.
transcripts required as well. Transcripts required as well.
I have a question about the technology related to it. What does the village have in terms of capability for conference calls and for video calls, namely for recording all of this? Who would host it? What does that look like?
Okay, we could do a Skype call-in. We have the capability here to do that, and recording it through the system while we're doing the Skyping.
So if the 5 of us are on Skype,
You can be at a separate location, okay, and we can Skype into a single location. Someone has to be the head of the conference,
right?
and that's how we would do a Skype location.
Does Skype automatically record?
It doesn't automatically, but we can make it record, yes.
I don't understand that. What does that
That
mean?
doesn't automatically record, but we can just push a button and say record.
So it records.
So it records.
Yeah, I guess
It's just that I'm sorry, it's just that other platforms automatically record, and they're very easy to use, and they both, I mean, there's just, I'm not telling you which one to choose, but some just automatically record and they then keep it on record. But, okay.
So, let's say the mayor is the head of the meeting. Would it be recording on her device? Or would it be cloud recording
No, we're recording on her device.
on her device?
I have a village phone and a village laptop. I mean, we haven't done that yet, right? I mean, we're not anticipating necessarily doing that. We haven't had that conversation yet.
No, we haven't done it yet. It can be done.
Okay, so I'd like to make a suggestion. You all should have a meeting, and you should use this technology for a meeting so that A, when we have to pull the trigger, we're not all sitting here fumbling through how to use this technology, and go through the steps for any one of your meetings in the next couple of days. Do a test run, make sure it's recorded right. Now you have to find a place to transcribe all this. I don't know if you have any transcription. I mean, I haven't heard about transcription in about a decade, but okay. You'll have to find a service that does it. That'll have to be added to the budget. Or if you have somebody on staff that can transcribe. Some of our meetings are an hour, 2 hours long. It's a lot of transcription unless somebody does it. Is there an automated platform that transcribes? They're not
There
great.
are, but what it sounds like, what I'm hearing from Stuart, is that at first you just provide a summary and you have to provide a transcript later on. It's usually a person that does
Right.
it. There are automated systems, but because it'll be using Skype, the audio will probably not be that great, and ultimately we'll want to have it accurate. So it'd probably be a person.
So, Stuart, it has to be, I'm on a conference call later with 2 other things, and I'm going to have to ask about transcription, because they're actually free services right now during this, I'll call it a crisis. So transcription, word by word, like on paper, Trustee Levin said this, colon, blah, 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 that kind of thing that we're talking about? Okay. Transcription of meetings, writing it down so I
You
can
want
include it.
proper punctuation as well, it sounds like.
Well, this isn't old. That's like from the 1900s. Okay, so I'll just give you a call with what I find out. I'm like on a parallel path here, but if I can share information, that would be great. If not, but I do think it has to be tested. That's what we're doing today. And my full-time job is testing all these teleconferencing platforms that we've already, to make sure that when you need it, it works and that we're not fumbling.
Two more things. One, recording conference calls.
I believe we can. I
How
would
would-
have to
how
look
would we-
into that. I'm almost certain we can.
I believe Jamie has insights
So
on this.
We have a number of freeconferencecalling.coms, at least accounts in our office, and it's just a setting to set up for recording. I think one of the things we have to look into if we're going to be putting it out to the public is how many people can dial in. So it may be limited, like we were on a call with the county on Friday and it filled up, shut down, and we couldn't
Right.
get on it. So we may have to bring in like a Zoom or something like that does it. That
would be the way to
yeah,
go.
But freeconferencecalling.com also does video conferencing, and we can look into see if they provide a service that transcribes it.
So the 2 things that bump people off on these systems is number of people simultaneously, number of calls simultaneously, like you may have a conference call going on, and you might. But the other thing that I've discovered, much to my chagrin, there's time limits depending on the contracts. So ours has a 40-minute limit. We need an hour, but ours apparently has a 40-minute limit.
The
We
free
weren't
one, I
aware.
don't know how
So at
long
40
they go.
minutes, it shuts down,
Good call,
and you can't
yeah.
get back on for another 24 hours. These are just things that, you're right, if 50 people get on,
That's why we have 3 accounts, but I didn't think of how long
yes,
it would
each
last
thing
for.
for a 24-hour period, yes. I will say that in most of these, they've set up representatives, like humans. You should call them and tell them that it's because of this that you're using it, and some of them have opened up their lines wider, which is, I think, very generous of them. Thank you. Oh, did you have one?
Yeah,
question?
so, is there, and this is a combination question, is it just our preference if we would want to do a conference call versus a video call? Or is there a hierarchy of try video, that if that doesn't work, try conference call?
That's your call as to
our
which
call.
one. That's your call.
Okay. My recommendation would be that, I mean, we could take it ad hoc, obviously, but for us, have an initial conversation of doing one versus the other versus trying to figure it out on the fly, and to have a backup recording going at the same time. So I could be screen capturing, for example, as you record on your device. What I don't want is that we have a hour and a half, 2 hour meeting, you press save, and then your computer shuts off, and now we don't have that recording. So for us, just on the front end to decide, here's how we're recording, here's the backup recording, and here's what the process is gonna be, so that if it comes down to that, we're not trying to text and call each other and figure that out.
All good advice.
So what I would like to recommend is that we can work on this internally over the next few days and set up a mock meeting and
Excellent.
go through all this. I don't know that we'll have everything ready for Wednesday, but if we're deciding that we're not going to have a Wednesday meeting, we'll use this time too.
So I actually
that was
think
your original
whether with the five of us, we have very rigid open meeting laws, and we're trying to figure out how they've been slightly loosened during this time when social distancing is more important than sitting in a room together, and it's gotten modestly, or actually, for open meetings law, this is a big leap forward in flexibility. It's still crazy to think that somebody should be able to sit in my living room with me if I'm doing a video conference, but, baby steps for New York State. But I think actually figuring out the technology for the group conference calls, beyond just the five of us where we have all these other rules, we are suspending the public meeting, or the meetings for our boards and commissions. But I know that some of them do want to continue having conversations or have different conversations. For example, the Ossining Arts Project, Bob and I, we were on that email. They're thinking about what does this mean for artists and art in our community? And we're supposed to be having a meeting, and they're setting up a Zoom call amongst themselves. But I did say, if there's anything the village can do to help facilitate and provide the platform. So I want to be sure that we have the ability for our volunteer boards, if they have meetings that they want to be able to have virtually, that seems like something, a level of support that we could certainly provide for them.
Right, and that's what we are working on, trying to do that for the Comprehensive Plan Committee. We will be postponing tomorrow night's meeting, but we're in conversation with our planning consultant who has suggested ways we can do things virtually, and we will, we're going to try to keep things going. People will need things to keep them busy. We have no lack of things to keep people busy, and if we get the technology up and running, we should be in a good shape for a lot of that stuff.
Excellent. Bob, you leaned forward. That means something.
I was just stretching.
So I'm hearing the volunteer boards, including land use boards, we talked about a 30-day sort of hiatus, if you will. That is not to say that they can't continue meeting as long as they're not voting or discussing public. I'm trying to understand what we're saying here, because we just went off on,
I'm confused, because I agree. I do not see the planning board or the zoning board having any meetings, at least over the next 30 days, at all. And I would think for those two groups,
Yeah.
video conferencing is significantly problematic because they all involve public hearings.
Yeah.
except, I'm sorry. No, but frankly, because people are going to be sitting at home, and if they have kids, they'll be climbing the walls in about 48 hours. There's plenty of time. And we talked about doing training. We talked about getting that going. There are things that can be done, and there are conversations that do not require votes and do not require people for the public to be aware of. And this
Requires
might
that our
be
counsel are available to do that as well.
that our law firm.
That's
yeah,
right.
by video.
That they are available to do
Right, but I'm just suggesting that within a month, we're not talking about this week, that we consider other things that, as to Karen's point, that there might be other things that don't require voting and don't require, that's what's being brought up here, actually, from both sides. So we can cancel the voting parts in the meetings, but we should now look at our many projects and many lists of things to do and say, hey, this might be an opportunity to do a training session for the new board members through video conferencing. That doesn't require any voting. It doesn't require public to be in on it. That's something that's sort of on our to-do list. So I'm asking that be addressed.
I mean,
And I'm not talking about like within the next 24 hours.
Yeah, you're not talking about the next 24 hours.
I'm not talking about the next 24
Because-
hours, and
yeah.
I'm not talking about by this Wednesday. I'm simply saying we're looking at a 30-day window here, are we not? So we shouldn't sit here in 3 weeks and have this conversation. We should start saying, to my point before about cross-pollination, what can we do?
let's,
that
you
way?
know, that's another thing on our list of things to talk about as we have our, all hands on deck staff meeting today at 2:00. Stuart and I can talk about some of the things that make sense to go on, and we'll put something together, so. Pardon me? No, two, that's the
Okay, we don't
Op
need
Center
to.
meeting. It's a different meeting.
Okay.
All right, we can move on to, so,
Do we now want to move on to what is currently scheduled for Wednesday?
Yeah, I think your suggestion was that it is acceptable and appropriate for us to address some of that now in the event that we may not ultimately hold a meeting on Wednesday if something else time-sensitive does not come up by then. Is that what's being suggested?
Yes.
And we didn't, as a board, have an opportunity to discuss taking care of all of Wednesday this Monday. It was just sort of a brief email that we could.
Right. And I'm sorry, is somebody notifying all of the volunteer boards at meetings or?
That is in the process of being done.
Yeah, well, all of that stuff will be taken care of.
Okay. I mean, this is some pretty perfunctory stuff that I don't think the public will be too upset that they aren't here at 8 in the morning to discuss. So, and I don't think it's going to be terribly controversial. So, thank you for suggesting this, Stuart.
Okay, we have approval of minutes, March 4, 2020. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby approves the minutes of the March 4, 2020 regular meeting as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? Clerk Counsel?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bob, you're abstaining, right?
Abstain.
Okay, next, approval of voucher detail, March, it does say 18. Tom, can I make that to turn to March 16? Thank you, March 16, 2020. Resolved that the
amount,
Board of
too.
Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby approves the voucher detail report dated March 16, 2020, in the amount of $1,033,074.93. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments on the board? Clerk Counsel?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Authorization for the village manager to sign agreement with Bigfoot Creamery LLC for use of the kiosk at Henry Gordine Park. Resolved that upon review by the Corporation Council, the village manager is authorized to sign agreement with Bigfoot Creamery LLC, 5 Still Court, Ossining, New York, 10562, for the use of the kiosk at Henry Gordine Park. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board. This is the most fun resolution we have for the night. And I can't wait. Maybe by this summer, we'll actually be outside in the world eating ice cream, watching a sunset.
We will all need ice cream, and we're going to have a big celebration. So ice cream will be
great.
part of it.
This is great. I think this is fun, actually, and it's great because it's actually a local residence, it's local business, it's new. It takes advantage of everything Ossining has to offer, so very excited, and everyone that knows me knows how much I love to eat, so all good stuff.
And I want to say thank you very much to Maddie Zahach.
Yes.
This was one of the projects that you took on as soon as you joined the village management team, and I couldn't be happier with how it seems to be working out. Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You. Okay, we have 2 cabaret licenses, so hopefully when things get back, they'll be having their cabarets. First is for El Matabita Sports and Bar Restaurant. Resolved that pursuant to the code, the Board of Trustees hereby approves a cabaret license for El Matabita Sports Bar Restaurant, Inc., 107 Main Street for 2020 as follows. Monday through Thursday from 12 p.m. to 11 p.m., Friday to Sunday, 12 p.m. to 2 a.m., live music and DJs. Do I have a motion?
So move.
So, second.
I assume that this has been, that the police and building department are A-OK?
I don't have this one in front of me right now, but from my recollection, we have no objection.
That's great. And I just wanted to, this is one of our few beer and wine license places, so they have their own little level of fee. Did that come through in the application to the clerk's office that you recall? You're not looking at it probably right now, so, okay. They operate as a beer and wine license, and there are actually 3 levels of cabaret fees involved, so I just want to make sure that they're being charged the proper fee, since there are not that many businesses that end up with this level, the mid-range.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Resolution approving cabaret license for La Isla del Tesoro, 185 Main Street, Ossining, New York. Resolved that pursuant to the code, the Board of Trustees hereby approves a cabaret license for La Isla del Tesoro Bar and Restaurant, 185 Main Street for 2020 as follows. Friday through Sunday, 9 p.m. to 2 a.m., DJ and live performance. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? Same question, Chief.
Just give me 1 second. I want to make sure that I'm looking at the proper property here.
Oh. Madam Clerk, did you want to comment on this?
It has been vetted, though. It's been vetted by the building department and the.
He signed off, right? Okay, and I have no objection.
We don't ever-
Okay, so it has been reviewed by our staff, and it is being recommended for approval. So,
All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
That concludes the resolution.
I know that the staff has been incredibly busy with the regular village business to the degree that that's been able to move forward, and largely with the many precautions that are being taken in the current state of COVID-19. And we did skip past the administrative reports. I'm not suggesting that you need to give a report, but is there any other item that, or message that Karen or Stuart or Kevin would like to express to us while we're in the meeting?
Not at this time for me.
Okay, well then I'll just say thank you so much to all of, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, we did have one more
Oh.
agenda item, though.
Okay.
So we had some discussions, the county is likely issuing a state of emergency today, and we had talked about, this gets somewhat complicated because we have many levels of emergency. Municipalities can issue state of emergency specific to their municipality. It's something that we should be aware of. And I would like to open up to a brief discussion here because it's something that we should be considering carefully. I'm not saying that we should do it or not do it, but I would like to hear from Corporation Counsel, our chief, and others on the board about our feelings about moving forward. It is likely that many municipalities will follow suit once the county makes their announcement today.
The provision for a local state of emergency is Section 24 of New York's executive law. And the state of emergency itself would last for 30 days and can be renewed. Once the state of emergency on a local basis is declared, the chief executive of the village, which in this case by statute is the village manager, could also institute various emergency orders based upon the state of emergency. Those could include curfews, those could include restriction on parking, limitations on public assembly, closing of businesses, etc. Those particular orders last for a period of 5 days and can be extended for an additional 5-day period. That section of the law, Section 24, does provide that a violation of the orders based upon the emergency declaration are considered a Class B misdemeanor. And so that's the practicality of doing it. So there's both a declaration of a state of emergency, which gets filed upstate. It gets filed with Albany, gets filed with the clerk here, gets filed with the county clerk, and then there are the local orders, the local emergency orders, depending upon what the situation on the ground is.
Anybody else speak?
So, thank you for that, Stuart. So then I guess the question would be related to enforcement. And can you speak to that, Chief Sylvester?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not my place to say whether or not the board chooses to enact a state of emergency. One of the concerns I have is that where we put restrictions in place, I need to know that the leadership is going to stand with the police department if in fact we're being asked to enforce these things. So if we're going to be, a lot of these things traditionally act as strongly worded recommendations. If we're going to be arresting people for either gathering in different places, whatever that is, I think that has to be clearly stated that that's the intention from the board, and that we're not going to be asked to do something and then everyone question the judgment of the cops after the law is put in place. So I'd just like some guidance on whether or not that in fact is the purpose of this, if it's enacted, and if so, then we go with our orders.
So also, I do have some concerns about enforcing things. The one thing I noticed this weekend driving around we're getting into nicer weather. Kids are not going to be at school. The community center is closed. And what I noticed is our parks and fields were packed. I did actually get some calls from people who were concerned about the number of people who were congregating in the parks and fields. Some of these were school fields, some of it was town and village parks. This is just going to be an issue. I'm not suggesting that we would want to arrest anybody, but if we're closing schools to do self-isolation and these things, this is going to be an issue. The other issue, I think that we are covered under the state state of emergency to be able to do what we need to do in terms of public meetings. So I don't think there's a necessity to do a local emergency order to be able to do anything in terms of meetings or.
No, because that's been suspended.
Okay,
we can
so we're covered there. So I do think that, and I'm not sure if a local state of emergency also facilitates the village or other even local businesses the ability to claim losses due to the virus.
It would depend on the policy. After the SARS outbreak a number of years ago, the business interruption coverage that applied for epidemics was taken out of many of the policies. However, there are provisions, indeed there's a provision in the village's own policy that deals with whether or not there is a declared state of emergency, which would require the shutdown of various government offices. And there may be similar language in business interruption policies that various businesses may have. I have no idea, but as I can say, the village's coverage does have that. Whether or not this would be considered what's called a triggering event, which would allow coverage to come into effect, is a different question. But there are provisions, at least in the village's policy, that deal with a declaration of an emergency by a governmental office, which would require the closure or significant shutdown of village businesses.
So for my part, there's a lot of ifs and maybes, and the biggest issue I have is enforcement. And you cannot, to the chief's point, pass a law, which is very easy to do. I mean, we could just say yes and go and do it, and then select who gets ticketed and who doesn't and what qualifies. So I think we need a little bit more information. We can always come together and how to enforce all of this. You know, this is a small municipality. We're not, you know, really in a position to start, you know, stopping religious institutions from having, we have a Jewish holiday coming up, you know, there's funerals that aren't happening, but some funerals are, and like, you know, I can't imagine a police officer going by gravesides and pulling people apart because there's more than 50 people, unless that's what this situation is. So before we start doing things, that when you look at the domino effect and what it means, for a municipality, I'm not talking about a state or a county government or a city, I mean a village, that I would hold off on making a go, no-go decision until we know a little bit more about how we would implement that decision, and to the chief's point, how we would be able to support whatever decision we make. I don't think there's a rush to it now because we have higher levels of governments. You know, the school districts were making their own decisions and the county decided to make, and that counts for the whole county. So I'm not sure we're in a rush on Monday morning, for me, without a little bit more implementation understanding of what it means and how it might affect others and how we can support the police and I would say the fire department. And while it's nice to talk about the National Guard, they were dispersed a week ago to New Rochelle. I'm not sure how many are still in activity if every municipality, 55 municipalities needed them for various things. So that's called implementation part that I think needs a little bit more thought. I don't know if that stops you from doing anything or from your perspective, but I think if we can get a little bit more information about what it would look like in reality, not just in calling something and then juggling around to figure out how to implement it realistically. That would be helpful to me personally. I'm only speaking for myself, but that's how I would look at it. And have some advantage of people that are doing it elsewhere, maybe some of the cities that are already beginning to look at it. As far as the policy discussion, while it sounds nice, I mean, I think that to Stuart's point that I would be surprised if almost anybody had that in their policy at this point. Between the 9/11 issues and other health issues that have come up, there are very few, certainly small businesses probably don't. So I'm not sure exactly, who's out there with a policy that will pay for that. But for this village and the businesses we have, I doubt it covers very many of our businesses to begin with. It's a nice idea, but I just don't think that's what exists out there right now.
At this point, I think the most important thing is that we keep consistent in our messaging, and we are widening our channels of communication to coordinate with different groups, whether it's on where we're doing food distribution. One of the things I do think that we need to do, I really feel for families right now with kids at home in the warmer weather, and saying, this is going to be a problem and not all families will be able to actually be home, particularly when they have older children, if they have to work. So I think we need to be consistent with our messaging, consistent with encouraging people to the degree possible to be aware that, soccer games and other things that seem like a great way to relieve anxiety and get out are probably not the best things to be doing at this time. At this juncture, unless there is, a community lockdown, which I don't think would be as successful locally as it would be on a larger scale, I am also concerned about the ability to enforce things that the other governments are not, the other layers of governments are not. But I would like to see us really be consistent in our messaging. And as we distribute food, I think we should look to generate flyers in English and Spanish that talk about what we need to do from a public health. We have all of this information online. Well, just another way to push it out and remind people that what's intuitive, what we usually do on a day off from school, is just going to be more challenging and possibly create more problems. I think that's the hardest thing right now that we have to deal with. And for younger people who are not going to be necessarily as concerned about the risks, we just need to do whatever we can to keep getting that message out and providing whatever support we can to our community, to each other, to get us through this time. That would be my recommendation right now. I am willing to any action that dramatic requires consensus and the ability to make sure that we can support it.
So, Bob, can I jump in real quick? As I understand what you're saying, Karen, the county, and it sounds like the town, will declare a state of emergency in order for us to stay consistent with that. The benefit of us doing that would be that we would be using consistent language with the rest of the layers of government. Is that accurate?
That would be the reason to do it now.
So me reading the most recent NICOM recommendations, should the local chief executive officer declare a local state of emergency, their recommendation is if it accomplishes one of the specific powers, like establishing a curfew or prohibiting or controlling traffic or whatever, it doesn't sound like to me like we're at the point where we're looking to exercise those powers. And so I would follow this directive where if it's just to stay consistent with them, but we're not actually using it to exercise the power, my recommendation would be to not declare at this point and then wait. And if we do need to do that, then do it down the road.
And let's also clarify the process. We're a village management form of government. We're having a very thoughtful discussion and being mindful of the fact that in our community, not everybody has a large home with a yard that they can keep their kids getting fresh air and having some sort of engagement. And so it is, if we are saying that we're going to be in lockdown mode and people aren't allowed to leave their homes, the burden is going to be felt more greatly by someone who lives in a very small apartment with their large family than someone who lives on a 2-acre property and can enjoy their homestead. So I'm really grateful to be on a board with people and part of a village government where we are all really sensitive to the difficulties that these kind of social distancing restrictions impose. And figuring out exactly what social distancing means is complicated. And I've spent most of the weekend trying to understand it, and I know that others are trying to figure it out too. So I think that the messaging that Karen was suggesting of English and Spanish recommendations of what this means, what are the behaviors that are going to help us slow the spread, and how can we maintain this. This isn't a one-day, snow day, stay in the house. We're talking about weeks of families being able to exist in a manner that is somewhat sustainable. I'm pleased by what I'm hearing from my colleagues and from our staff on how it doesn't make sense to declare something with sort of ominous language if we're not going to enforce it, yet we're all saying we want to see the same types of behaviors recommended and the same type of messaging consistent throughout our community, consistent with the state and county government. But it is not actually a board vote. So what I'm getting a sense of is we may not meet as a board again for 9 days. I'm hearing from the chief of police that if we were going to give the authority to be able to have some sort of crackdown and enforcement measures, it would really only make sense to do that if the board was going to be supportive of suggesting that law enforcement needs to be breaking things up in a way that, or sending people home, or arresting people, or business owners if we decided to be more rigid than is currently the case. But if Karen decided that there was a need to move forward with declaring it, she can do that without us. The question is, what would be the purpose if it wasn't going to be enforceable? And it's not clear necessarily. In the past, when we've had a state of emergency, it's because of some short-term major storm, and it allows us to have more access to FEMA reimbursement. And I don't know if the local state of emergency is necessary, if we already have the county and the state, if that gives us an even stronger argument. If what we're talking about is simply a financial circumstance, that's a little different than if what we're talking about is the potential for curfews and enforcement of stay out of the parks.
I think we're all in agreement. I think that we will, this is a thoughtful and conscientious decision that will be made. If it is, and it will not be one that I will not seek information from people who know better than I do about this, to go forward in that regard. I think right now, again, to your point, Mayor, the people universally hardest hit, separate from the virus itself, this is devastating on people who have to work to get paid, who can't work from home, who live in small quarters, who have children who are going to have to stay home now. That is not to say that we turn a blind eye on things if it also exacerbates a spread of virus. It just says that we need to go forward with a firm understanding that it will be hardest to comply to most of the things that we need to do for our most vulnerable populations. And how do we ease the ability to comply and ease the burden that those families will have? It is, as a village manager of a village like Ossining, is my single greatest concern that we achieve both those objectives to the highest degree possible. It's only if I feel that that will be achieved by a local executive order for an emergency that I would go in that direction, and that would be informed by a group of experts that we have in staff and municipal government and elected officials.
Thank you. Is there anything else people want to contribute to the conversation?
I just would also, I happen to, the emotional part, I agree with everything you're saying, and I'm sure that we work as a team, and nobody's going to do something this dramatic without including many people. Experts is, an interesting comment since we've never seen this before, and I find that there's not a lot of expertise going on out there. So we're all going to work as a team, which is exactly what you're saying. Part of the vulnerable part of our community is the largest growing community, part of our community is the people are aging in place. Actually, Westchester-wide, that is the most significant growth. If I might suggest a humanistic part for those that might be working from home, it would be helpful to call people in their homes if we have their numbers and see if they're okay, because regardless of what size house or property you live on, vulnerable is a term that can be used in many ways. There is a real emotional and social issue, so people can't get social help right now. It's not about whether they have food or not. It's that they are totally isolated. And if people do have time to call. Chief, I told somebody yesterday whose wife had recently passed, and he's, I mean, you could see how alone he feels. And I remember you saying that people, if they have to go away, because he wants to leave New York to go with one of his children because he's so alone and he can't go anywhere, that he can call the police department and let you guys know that when somebody's not in their home for a while, that you guys, is a regular course, you do this in Ossining.
Yes, dark house checks.
It's called?
A dark house check.
Okay, so people, I think, who are also elderly, who feel very vulnerable right now, might be going and leaving their homes in order to be with their children, who may live in more, in different parts of the country. So whatever we can do to help people who are really isolated, especially people who I guess have been, I don't want to say targeted, but over 60, because it seems to be more, they're more susceptible or immune susceptible, that would be really helpful to do, and that's the emotional part, not the food and the needs part. I know that's the secondary piece, but that would be great if we could look into helping our community that way, which I'm sure you're on top of as well. So I appreciate all the work that's going on. Thank you.
All right.
Is there a decision about Wednesday's meeting?
Yeah, I thought there was. I guess we didn't make a decision after all.
We did not formally make a decision. It does seem like we no longer have an agenda for Wednesday. Do you want to
I
meet?
was going to say, if there's no agenda, what would we meet about?
Put that in a motion, or do I?
I think that's what Stuart is saying.
No, I'm just getting a sense of the board, because that way we would just put something on the website that Wednesday's meeting.
Yes, that would be, yes.
And just confirming, we will issue communication about the community center being closed until further notice. We will issue communication to all the volunteer boards that any voting decision-making meetings are canceled for 30 days, but we are looking at ways that to create other opportunities for either trainings or other discussions. And we will go forward with our policies to limit public engagement in our facilities at the Ops Center and at 16 Croton.
So you're going to be putting out communication today with all of that, all of the measures that are being undertaken.
Over today, well, the immediate things, the community center and the meetings we'll put out today, and then as I want to meet with staff and make sure we're all in lockstep on the issue of limiting public access. So between today and tomorrow, all that information would go out.
And information about the grab-and-go food ability that's starting tomorrow?
Yes, so we'll also, like, in tandem with that, we'll start pushing out information about what Feeding Westchester will be doing, and then I know that the school district has another feeding schedule, and we'll work to communicate that. And to the degree that we can work with, we are in touch with our agency partners, and I think having some of them maybe develop, community check-ins and have people sign up. Like, we'll work with them to do some of these things, and then we'll try to push as much information out on our social media and our website about what other groups are doing and who you can contact.
And all of us should share that in our own circles and social media networks. You talked about having guidelines and recommendations so we can be having this consistent messaging for people of what is appropriate behavior right now, what does social distancing mean, how can you change your behavior. Do you have a resource that you'll be pointing people to, or is that something you're figuring out?
So we have all the resources that we have, all the fact sheets, everything we're getting from the county and the CDC is all being pushed out on the website in pretty much real time. So what we'll do is we'll go through most of this. I think a lot of the sort of fact sheets on social distancing are up there. We'll get them printed up in English and Spanish, and we'll hand them out at distribution, food distribution sites. I think we have, Jamie, we have all the content on that right now, pretty much.
Not on social distancing.
I think there's probably stuff we can put together pretty easily.
CDC website has all, there are 4 major websites that have everything. Just create the link, and as they update, it'll be updated.
So I know one of the things that the school has done is they have a page that is just a list of every communication on this particular subject. So maybe do we with every, what I'm thinking is all of the relevant links for everything we've been talking about, all of the measures that we have put in place today, the things that we have passed, the resolutions that are relevant, the policies that we're going to have moving forward for the changing of the access.
Yeah, Jamie's done a phenomenal job of compiling this stuff, and we have several
There's a
different.
whole page of it. If you go to the quick links, it says coronavirus, COVID-19. It's all there, and it's got links to everything. It also, it was updated on Friday when I left for religious organizations, what they're supposed to do. So we've got everything up there, and the whole page translates to Spanish.
Excellent.
And there's some Chinese on there also.
Excellent. Thank
We're
you.
looking at other PR opportunities to get this out, working with Honest Creative and others to just make sure we're getting out as much information as possible.
Excellent.
Do we have to vote on anything? I have to go.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Oh, I see. Well, I don't know. Are you done, Mayor?
Second. Second. Somebody needs to second. I can't second.
Oh, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned. Our next village board meeting is tentatively scheduled for next Wednesday, the whatever that is, 25th? The 25th. This meeting is adjourned.